We have males in female prisons. They are violent sexual assault criminals who are identifying as female and having access to female prisons. We're seeing males in rape crisis centres and shelters for women who have been abused by males. We're seeing children at school identifying as the opposite sex.
Depression is not the problem. Depression is a symptom of a problem. It was like going from hot water to cold water instantaneously. So the effect of that is what over time caused a lot of damage to me.
Make sure that you tell someone that you know you can trust.
I know my songs and stories will bring healing in these days of fear and uncertainty.
You are listening to the Under the Rug podcast with Nalini Tranquim.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Under the Rug. I am your host, Nalini Tranquim. Today, we are uncovering an issue that is sweeping across our neighborhoods, our society, and our world at large. It is not just affecting men, women, girls, and boys, it is infecting. I don't often start my interviews by quoting scripture, but today I must. Genesis 1 verse 27. God created human beings. He created them godlike, reflecting God's nature. He created them male and female. God blessed them. Prosper, reproduce, fill earth, take charge. And yet, fast forward to today, we are facing harmful gender theory and an aggressive ideological agenda that comes with it. We are seeing the attempts to remove biological sex from our society in the areas of education, health, military, business, politics, and the law. We are seeing and hearing damning reports as a direct result from our men, women, teenagers, and children. And so it is critical that we educate ourselves on what is happening on our watch so that we can get up and bridge the gap for our people. We all have a collective responsibility here. Well, it is my honor and privilege to introduce to you a passionate wife and mother who challenges our political leaders to protect our children, our parents' rights, women's spaces and services, sport and the military, and education from radical gender ideology. She is the founder and director of an organization in Australia called Binary. Kirralie Smith, welcome to Under the Rug.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Nalini.
Of course. Well, before we get started, there really is a cost to standing up for truth, and you have had an extremely tough year. Can you give us an overview of what's been going on?
Oh, look, the mind boggles, and when I tell people what's been going on, even I sit here and go, is this for real? Did it really happen? But it did really happen, and it's still really happening to me. So far I have faced 5 court matters, and I have 1 to go. One of those was a tribunal, and I'll explain more of that in a moment. So last March 2023, I had the police arrive on my doorstep and issue me with applications for apprehension of violence orders against me. Now, I'm a 52-year-old woman on a crutch because I have a busted knee. I'm overweight. I'm not a physical threat to anyone. I never have been, never will be. And the whole reason that they turned up was because I identified some male soccer players in female competitions in New South Wales. I had identified them, criticised them, called them male, and that landed me eventually with applications for 3 apprehension of violence orders. So they're called AVOs in New South Wales. The first one was withdrawn before it went to court. The second one, we had all the, you have to go through mentions and hearing directions and all this sort of stuff. 6 months later, end up in Burwood Court in front of a magistrate. Lots of money spent on lawyers. Greg Smith, the former Attorney General, as my representative. And literally at the very last moment at 2:00 in the afternoon, when the magistrate was ready to hear the matter, the police said, we're withdrawing. No explanation, no apology. So That was very frustrating, but so the first one withdrawn before court, the second one withdrawn in court, the third one did go to hearing. And just a week or so ago, the judge or the magistrate, she denied that application because, sharing a photograph that was publicly available online and advocating for policy and directing all of my advocacy towards Football Australia and Football New South Wales, never naming the player, never directing anything to the player because this is a policy issue, the magistrate did deny that application. So that was really good. That was 3 AVOs from applications that were denied or unsuccessful. And then I've had 2 vilification complaints by the same 2 players because I called them male and identified them, and they applied to the New South Wales Anti-Discrimination Board, which then referred the matter to the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, which is called NCAT in New South Wales. And the first one went to hearing last year, but the New South Wales Attorney General intervened and said that this matter cannot be heard by the tribunal because it is about the implied freedom of political speech in the Constitution, and constitutional law must be heard in a court that comes under federal jurisdiction. So it's all very technical, but the bottom line is that case was dismissed. I have another one very similar in nature in March, but we are quite confident that that one will also be dismissed. They do have the option to refile in a local or district court if they want to, but the stakes are much higher, the costs are much higher, the standards are much higher. So, look, I feel personally it's been, a long process, and as they say, the process is the punishment, and that it has been designed not just to intimidate or silence me, but to intimidate and silence you and your listeners and every other person in Australia. And so
that's exactly right.
I think it's very important that I stood up and I said, no, I will fight this all the way, and I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to be intimidated. This is a very important issue that all Australians should have the freedom to discuss. I never swear. I'm never threatening. I'm never vile. I'm never, anything other than just wanting to have a reasonable, logical conversation about these things. And so come at me however you will, but I'm not backing down.
Come on, girl. Oh, you put a fire in my belly, you do. Okay, well, we are cheering you on, okay, for case number 6. Keep going.
Thank you.
Kirralie, I'd like to start our conversation today with the basics. I've had people writing in and asking, what does gender theory even mean?
Whoever can describe that succinctly deserves an award because I don't really know. It means deception, and it means denial of reality and denial of biological sciences. Gender identity is basically, it's a feeling, it's an emotion, and it's an attempt to reject the body that you were born in, that our Creator designed us to live in. And it's very much personality. I think it's a personality issue. I think it's also an escape. Most people who are struggling with their gender identity unfortunately have something like autism, trauma, depression, or other mental health issues. So it's very real. People do struggle and have gender incongruence, and they deserve a great amount of compassion and care. But I don't believe that lying to them or forcing other people to lie about them is the solution to this problem, because we can't change the reality of our sex. No amount of feelings, costumes, drugs, or surgery can do that. So it's real. They deserve compassion, but the way that things are going at the moment is not helping anyone.
No, it's not good. In layman's terms, what is this ideological agenda that we hear thrown around so much these days?
It's basically that men want to take on a costume or a stereotype and say they're now women, and vice versa. There's different motivations for both in those things, and they're usually quite different. And like I said, they're valid. People and children have these things. We often find that the younger children, though, are being very encouraged and influenced by their parents who have issues. But it is complex, but it's also very simple, and that is that they think, or the parents think, that problems are going to be resolved if they just change their sex. But no one can change their sex, so therefore the problems are not resolved.
Yes, exactly. So what does it mean then on the ground when we hear that biological sex is being removed from our society? And can you give us some examples?
Yeah, look, we could talk all day about this one, so I'll try and just give a few. But in law, in many states, in Victoria and in the ACT, in Queensland now, and Tasmania, people can just self-identify as whatever sex they like, which means they can rewrite history and go down to births, deaths and marriages and say, even though the fact remains that they were born, let's say, a male, if they decide they want to identify as female, they can change that marker on their sex, on their birth certificate, which means they can get passports and other official identity documents. And it's based on a lie. It's not true. That a person who's a male will always be a male. So that's one thing that's happening. What that then impacts, where we have self-identification, and even in the states where that's not law yet, it's still happening. We have males in female prisons. They are violent sexual assault criminals who are identifying as female and having access to female prisons. We're seeing males in rape crisis centres and shelters for women who have been abused by males. We're seeing children at school identifying as the opposite sex. And as you know, that there's a myriad of days of celebration for, Ida Hobbit Day and Transgender Day and all of these non-binary things. And what happens is children who are often ostracised, bullied, or, not popular at school, they identify as the opposite sex or as non-binary, they're suddenly celebrated and protected in their behaviours and what they get away with. We can dive into that a little bit more, but basically, there could be a strict uniform policy, but that's out the window for these students. They can wear whatever they like. They all only have to wave the flag, and that's their excuse for bad behaviour and so on. So, and, where I've gotten into a lot of trouble is where males are identifying as female and accessing women's sport and change rooms. It's not okay. It's unfair. It's unsafe. It's not dignified. It's actually just quite ridiculous. We can all see with our own eyes what's going on here, and yet there are protections in law. So, and then I think the very worst of all of these things is that children are being put on experimental pathways of medications and treatments that's doing irreversible, catastrophic harm to their bodies that will never be reversed. That children cannot consent to these things. They can't consent to piercings and tattoos and alcohol and gambling and all the other things that we protect and safeguard children from. And yet, especially in Victoria and other states, these children, the only option is to put them on these pathways. They're drugs that are being used off label. It's like, we can just do whole episodes on these things, Nalini, because they are unbelievable. So that's a snapshot, and I'm happy to go wherever you want to go with that sort of.
Oh my goodness, the condition of our world, hey? According to a prominent hospital in Melbourne, Australia, gender dysphoria is defined as a medical term that refers to the distress that a person may experience when there is an incongruence between their gender identity and their gender assigned at birth. What do you say to the parent whose son comes home saying, I'm a girl, or whose daughter comes home saying, I'm a boy?
Look, there's so much, and what I would say to a parent is very different to what I'd say to a politician or even the public. But first of all, I would say that, we have spent decades, in fact, centuries, trying to dismantle stereotypes, rigid stereotypes that have put us in boxes, particularly have been harmful for women. And we, I grew up as a child and teenager in the 80s and 90s, and it was a wonderful time to be a girl, girl power, we can do all things. And equality really seemed to be something that was achievable. And, I knew I could grow up and be whatever it is I wanted to be, and it wasn't my biological sex that would stop me from achieving those dreams. But now it seems that if a girl expresses, tomboyish kind of preferences, then immediately she's told that she's a boy, which is utterly ridiculous. And a boy who expresses some sort of feminine stereotypical traits, he'll be told that he should identify as a girl. So I think it's really cruel. I think it's harmful to lie to these children and to deceive them into thinking that if they take drugs, if they have surgery, if they do these really dramatic and drastic measures, that they'll become the opposite sex, because they won't. And it's all based on these stereotypes, which is it's just insane as far as I'm concerned. So we're the Melbourne Children's Hospital and the clinic down there. I don't know what their motivation is. I don't know why they are doing this, but it is being proven time and time again, and increasingly so as time goes by, that their so-called gold standard of treatment for these children is to immediately affirm them and to immediately put them on the puberty blockers and later on the cross-sex hormones. Whereas in the United Kingdom, in the Nordic states such as Norway, Sweden and Finland, very thorough investigations and reviews have proven that that is not the best pathway for these children. Those kind of treatments have been paused or stopped altogether, and yet our politicians here in Australia refuse to do the inquiries or the investigations to see, is this really the best path for our children? So, there's something going down that is really suspicious here. And you go, if their treatments really are gold standard, what are they afraid of? Why can't there be a very open, transparent and rigorous inquiry into these practices? I suspect it's because they know the outcome and it won't be in their favour.
Yikes, that's scary. I mean, just while you were saying that, I've been spending some time on the medical board for Australia, just having a look at the code of conduct that doctors, swear to when they take on the responsibility of their patient's well-being. And I mean, there's one item that says upholding your duty to your patient and not discriminating against your patient on grounds such as race, religion, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, or other grounds. And you're here saying that they affirm the sex that they are not.
Correct. So it's very Orwellian language, turning it inside out. It's not an affirmation. It's a denial of their biological sex. Gender identity, as I said, is a personal preference. It's a personality trait. It's got nothing to do with reality. We all have feelings that are not based on reality. And we should be taught resilience and how to overcome those feelings so that they do realign with reality. And these children in particular are not being taught that. They're being taught that whatever they want, they'll get. And, this example has been used and it's quite confronting, but to think that, an anorexic or a child with a eating disorder, we don't affirm the eating disorder. We come alongside them, we support them, we acknowledge their feelings, but we don't affirm their feelings. So why are we doing that with these children?
Yeah, okay, you've hit the nail on the head there. So what do you say then to the parent whose children are currently attending a school where they are rolling out changes to accommodate gender theory?
And this is happening. Oh my goodness, it's happening. And so look, there's a lot of things. I think, first of all, be vocal, use your voice. The children are given to you, whether you're Christian or not. I am, and I believe that it is the God-given right and responsibility for a parent to raise their child. It's where all of the power, all of the rights, all of the responsibilities lie. And so parents, do not concede that responsibility to the state, because that's what you're doing if you just don't question what's going on. So first of all, speak to the principal, write to them, email them, ring them, get an appointment, whatever it is you need to do. And I would say before you even enroll your child in a school, ask them, what is your gender policy? A lot of schools don't have it, and we're seeing that just work out so badly at the moment. Get around other parents who feel the same way. There is strength in numbers, and assert your rights. And where the law, such as Victoria, says that, teachers can socially transition children without parental knowledge or consent, don't give in to that, challenge that. And look, it could be costly for some parents, I grant that, but if we don't stand up and draw a line in the sand, nothing will change. So secondly, I would say you need to talk to the education ministers. You need to go to your local member of parliament. They think this is not a problem, or they only hear from the very vocal trans activists and gender identity activists. They need to hear from you regularly of what's going on in your school, how you feel about it, and what can be done. So again, children who are suffering from gender identity incongruence, then they need support, but they do not need to be indulged with the fantasy that's going on in their mind.
I agree. I absolutely agree, which actually leads perfectly into my next question, because I would like for you to speak directly to our children, our teenagers, our men and our women who are struggling with gender dysphoria right now? What advice do you have for them?
Well, first of all, I'm deeply sorry to anyone who's struggling with this. I can't imagine how difficult and traumatic that must be. And I would encourage you greatly to allow, to find someone trustworthy that you can talk with and work through this with, because it's more than likely that you'll find that it is a trauma, an abuse, a mental health issue, a depression, something like that has triggered this in the first place. Yes. So go and deal with the real issue, not the symptoms here. And I would say that if someone says to you that your problems will be resolved by identifying as the opposite sex, they're lying to you. It is a deception. It will not achieve what you want it to achieve. There is no amount of drugs or surgery that can change your sex. And so first things first, accept reality. 2, find a trusted person to walk this through with you. All of us have problems. Every single one of us on earth will face troubles. But, this is where community, where family is so important. There are specialists who have the right tools that can help us to get through all of these things. But it's really important that we don't try and pretend they're not happening or choose a pathway that really isn't going to resolve the issue anyway.
Yeah. And what do you say to those who believe that people are born with gender dysphoria?
I don't believe that at all. There's no evidence to suggest that either. As a Christian, I don't believe that God makes mistakes or that we're born in the wrong body. But even so, there's no evidence in science for that either. There's just no evidence. It always comes back to either parents, encouraging false stereotypes in their child, or it comes from trauma, autism, abuse, or for men or teenage boys and older, it's born out of a pornography addiction, and that just coming out of control. I know you spoke to Melinda Tankard-Reese recently, and it's horrifying, but it is. Pornography is the thing that's not spoken about much in this whole gender identity issue. But I will say, we are created to participate in sex only with our spouse. We're not designed it's not a spectator sport. We're not meant to watch other people have sex. And then when particularly these boys do that, they go down that pathway of arousal, their serotonin or whatever the chemical is not met, so it increases. But then they go down these really perverted, really concerning pathways and end up looking at transgender pornography and thinking that they themselves are trans. It is a real mess. So there's a condition called autogynephilia, AGP for short, and you'll find that that's a very common background story for a lot of guys who want to identify as girls.
How should employees be responding to policies and procedures that they don't agree with when it comes to gender theory that are being rolled out in the workplace?
Look, I think this is a really hard one and a really complex one. And again, I can't advise, there's a cost. There's a cost to go along with it, but there's a cost to stand up. But I think the cost is greater if you go along with it. That's my personal opinion. Yeah. I understand that people have mortgages to pay and families to raise and food to put on the table. So I guess, depending on your industry, depending on the job, you need to look at ways. The bottom line is it's the legislators are the only ones that can change the laws. And they will only change the laws if there's enough threats to the votes that they're going to get. Yes, and so it's a long game. It's something that you may have to be, a little bit wise as serpents in going into it and making sure that you are writing letters to the appropriate people in government, talking to your boss if you can do that, asking questions. I think a really great way to be an activist in this space is to simply ask questions, to ask, what is your definition of a woman then? And we know that, people go, that's just inflammatory and everything, but it's not. You have to be able to answer that question, because if you want me to accept that that's the woman's toilets, well, who's allowed in there? You need to tell me well, what's the definition of a woman here? And so ask the questions. We don't have to come out bullet at a gate, accusing people or being too brash and harsh in that environment, but we can ask the questions. And so I really encourage people to do those sort of things, write the letters, have the conversations. And for some people, it will be a matter of stand up in your workplace, challenge the law, see it through, and hopefully organisations like mine and others will stand by you and help you to do that.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Whilst we don't necessarily agree with gender theory, some evidently do. And whilst it's important that those who know the truth about how damaging and divisive this theory is and must continue to advocate against it, how do we sensitively navigate that tricky terrain when a man in our friend group, whom we thought we knew, shows up at dinner in a dress?
Again, look, every situation's so different, and it's very hard to be specific in that response. But again, I personally hope you have compassion on that person and ask them, what's the motivation behind that? They could be provocative. They could be very disturbed. There could be anything, in between. But I think it's a matter of, respectfully saying that, that's a stereotype. It's not something that has to be adhered to. And he can't become a woman. So what's behind it? And so it's really hard to respond if you don't know what's behind it, I guess is what to say. So relationship is so important in every aspect of our lives. And if someone's going to come to your home to dinner and turn up like that, then let's hope you have the relationship to be able to genuinely ask compassionate questions. But you need to resolve in your own mind what is possible, what is not possible, what's real and what's not real, and have that conversation. And again, there may be cost in that relationship. You may lose that relationship. But I hope for each one of us, we could know that we've done so, trying to be compassionate, but also not compromising on what's real and what's true. I like
that. Passionate, but not compromising. Yeah, that's really good. What do you want to say to transgenders who are waiting for gender-affirming surgery as we speak?
Yeah, look, I think it's mandatory. It should be mandatory. If someone is going down this pathway, whether it's surgery or drugs, that they need to really look at both sides and see, by all means, there are some people who have gone through these things and claim to be free and happy. Though, like I said, you'll find that they're often involved in things like autogynephilia, or that it's women who are trying to escape abuse or protect themselves from further abuse. But I would say to every single person, every single parent who's considering this for their child, and anyone who's considering this for themselves personally, have a look at the regret stories, have a look at the detransitioners and the desisters, because they're horrifying. They are like watching a horror film. For males who go through genital reconstruction, it's a lifetime of possible infections. It's a lifetime of having to dilate. It's a lifetime of drugs that you have to maintain. And there's so much regret. For girls who go down this pathway, it's things like male pattern baldness. It's having to possibly face early menopause due to your womb atrophying. It's just horrendous. And I don't believe these things are spoken about anywhere near enough. And too many people who have regret, or detransitioners or desisters, say they had no idea of what would happen. And it's because there's no education about these things. So get educated, be fully informed. If you're going to still go through with it, do it knowing that you know all of the possible consequences that you could face.
Are you able to share an actual story that has impacted you?
Well, look, there's so many, and many of them are over the internet. There are people that I have met in real life as well who have gone down this pathway, but and it's different again for males and for females. But for nearly all of them, there has been some trauma, a trigger that has led to this, and each one of them feels so damaged and so abused by the medical system that refused to offer that really in-depth counselling or psychotherapy that they needed. And now not only do they have the original trauma that's not dealt with, they now have physical trauma that they will have to live with for the rest of their life. So, Scott, well, let's go. Chloe Cole is a very famous detransitioner in the US, and she had a double mastectomy around the age of 15 or 16. She went on testosterone. It was really traumatic. And to this day, like 5 years later, her nipples still weep with pus and infection. So that's a very graphic and dramatic thing. There are men who, as I said, they'll have their penis reconstructed into a neo-vagina, it's called. They have to dilate that, but it's so susceptible to infection. It's something that they have to do 3 or 4 times a day. It's extremely painful. Of course, it's non-functioning. So now, and a lot of them say their dysphoria is heightened because they then realise more than ever that didn't turn them into the opposite sex. So it's horrifying. It's a real life horror story for some of these people.
I'm so thankful for you and for your advocacy, honestly. I think also just coming on the show and just educating us, because I think unfortunately for many of us, because it's something that we don't understand, we shy away from it, and because it's not necessarily impacting our immediate world, we tend to just sort of, put the barriers up. But we can't. This is happening on our watch, and we have a responsibility before our people, beyond the 4 walls of our families.
Absolutely. And so many people say, but we just need to be kind or loving or tolerant. But I would say that lying and deceiving someone is not kind or tolerant or accepting in any way, shape or form. And what's happening is too many people, and even Christian schools and churches are being sideswiped by this. It comes into their school, into their church, into their family even, and they haven't thought about it. And so they're left reeling, going, but we just need to love this person and accept this person, which, yes, I agree. You absolutely do need to love this person, but loving them is not telling them lies. Loving them is not going along with the lie. And too many people, just haven't thought about these things before it happens to them or it comes into their circle. And I think you'll find increasingly now, nearly everyone I meet in whatever sphere of life has a story to tell, whether it's from their own family or from their community.
Yeah, we can't ignore that. What do you want to say to the doctors who are prioritising ideology over biology whilst filling their pockets in the process?
So much. So much. It's, like anything, medicine, more than anything, should be very accountable and very high standards. Yes. And in most areas of medicine that happens, there are very long-term, rigorous, vigorous studies. There has to be a lot of data collected before most drugs are made available on the market. Procedures have to be carried out. There's a lot that goes in it, but not in this industry. And it's so horrifying that pretty much all puberty blockers prescribed in Australia at the moment are prescribed off-label. They have not been approved for this use. They have been only approved for precocious puberty, which is, 8 or 9-year-olds entering puberty earlier. They just take them for a little bit until their peers catch up and then they can go into puberty. They have not been studied or approved for this use that they are being used at the moment. The same with cross-sex hormones. There are more women on testosterone in Australia than there are men. Testosterone is meant to be a drug just for men who have prostate issues or cancer or, low testosterone, and yet figures that have come out in Parliament have shown that there are actually more women on testosterone than there are men, and it has not been studied or approved, and the side effects of women taking testosterone is horrendous, with things like baldness, facial hair, and great damage to our internal organs. And so I would say to those medical practitioners that there's no amount of money in the world that's more important than your integrity, and each one of you should be strongly advocating. If you really believe that this is the best course of action for these young people, then make sure that the studies are done, put your names to them, get the data, and prove to us that this is okay, because there is no evidence anywhere in the world. In fact, all the evidence points to this being very damaging and destructive.
I agree. And I hope these doctors are going to be held to account with these harrowing stories, of people who have been through it.
Absolutely. And there's already stories of some people being sued or going through legal action, but we probably won't see a lot of that here in Australia for another couple of years. But I believe then there will be a flood of these kind of cases, because, it's about coming up on 10 years where these sort of pathways have been undertaken. And what we're going to see is those children now becoming adults and realising that they're sterile, they have no sexual function, their brain and bone development has been hindered, their cholesterol levels are out of this world, and who knows what other implications, but they're all serious enough. And so I do believe that we will see many of these people taking their medical practitioners to court.
Yeah, I should think so. Your organisation, Binary, has been established to protect children from indoctrination, protect women from men appropriating womanhood for personal gain, and to stop politicians from instituting, a phrase that we have already used, ideology over biology. For all men and women who are listening to this conversation around the world who still believe that we have been created male and female, just as God himself had intended, and as your website so beautifully articulates it, two complementary sexes, equal but different, here's my question. What can they practically do to join the fight in combating this aggressive ideological agenda?
Yeah, look, there's several things. First and foremost, it's awareness. The more people are aware, the more ability we have to change the legislation. So first and foremost, I ask people, inform yourself. A website like mine, we have a lot of resources, fact sheets, downloads, testimonies, and campaigns that we're running. So go through the website of mine and other similar organisations, get informed. Secondly, share that information. There are people in your network who, as you've already alluded to, just don't understand what's going on, don't know what's going on, and especially in Aussie culture, we like just to, we go to work, we raise our families, we play sport, or whatever it is, that's great. That's what we should do. But we need to be informed. And then I would say, we do need war chests for these, the legal fights that we have to go through, but also the campaigns that we need to run. And then we do need to be actively engaged with our politicians, whether we like, yes. I think politics in this country is so broken. The system is horrendous, but it's the system we have. And if we don't use it well, then we're going to lose it. And we're already seeing that with, other bills wanting to come in the misinformation and disinformation bills and the digital identity bills and things like that. They're wanting to take away our voice and our ability to speak and our ability to act. So what we need to be doing is engaging with our local politicians. I've used this example before on my website. I spoke to my federal politician who's a former Minister for Health, and he had no idea that there were males in female prisons in this country. So he's a legislator. He's the only one, he's one of the... There's 150 in federal parliament, and then we've got the state parliaments. So there's not many people in this country who have the power to change this, but the ones that do don't even know what's going on, So it's up to us to make sure that we're constantly, and so many people just say, they don't listen anyway, or they just do what they want. I'm telling you, if enough people tell them these things, they will, because they want their jobs. They only keep their jobs if they get the votes. They only get the 100%. Votes if there's enough numbers. So I can't stress enough how important it is to be constantly informing them, asking them questions, chasing them up, and then banding together in groups. So, we have over 100,000 subscribers with Binary. There are other organisations. I believe we're the largest single-focused gender critical organisation in Australia. But, just do what you can. There are things then like rallies, protests, and getting together. I love what one lady in South Australia did. She went to her local council, borrowed books from the library that were extremely explicit and ridiculous in this gender ideology. She read them out in council at the public meeting, which hilariously they banned from the live stream because it was too explicit. Yet these books are on the youth or children's section in the local library. But it's things like that we do have. We're ratepayers. We can all go and borrow the books, take them off the shelves in the library and go and tell the councillors of what's going on. So there's lots of practical steps. We always have those sort of campaigns running as well. We have things like parent packs that can be handed out at schools, and different things that we can do through sports as well. So there's lots of opportunities, but number one is raise awareness. Number two is lobby your politicians.
So good. And so to my audience, I encourage you to visit Kirralie's website, binary.org.au. If you click /join, you can actually sign up to her email letter and be kept informed about current cases, things that are happening under our noses as we speak, and different campaigns that you can actively become a part of. So get involved. I think our days of sitting on the sidelines hoping that our schools are going to raise our kids are over.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We cannot be doing that. We need to be proactive. Kirralie, what do you want to say to our schools?
Oh, again, so much. Personally, I've had a really hard, back to school time. I homeschooled my 3 children, and I'm so glad I did. I didn't do it because of gender identity. That was, my oldest is now 20, so it was well before that even came on my radar. Yeah. But before that, I worked in the local Christian school, and so did my husband. And, this week our community's been rocked because without even informing most people, there's a boy wearing a girl's uniform, joining the girls' sports. We asked them years ago for their gender policy, and they did not have one, and clearly still don't. And so I would say to schools, first and foremost, all schools, state or private, you need to have a policy on these things, and it can be a reasonable policy, and it's not to exclude these children, but it's that biological reality will take precedence over feelings. That's the bottom line, and that you will protect all students by giving girls the sex-based services and spaces that they deserve, because now whether it's that school or and there's plenty of other Christian schools around the country that are doing the same thing. What happens when they go on school camp? Are they going to be accommodated with the boys or the girls? What happens with school sport? What happens with the change rooms? If you don't have a policy, it will be undermined. It will be taken advantage of. It will be challenged, and it's unacceptable. So first and foremost, I say to schools, what is your transgender policy or gender identity policy? And parents, ask your schools, ask them, force them to make these sort of policies. And if you're not happy with them, challenge it. Challenge it reasonably. There's no need to be rude. There's no need to do any of those things. But for the Christian schools, if you don't mind me just speaking to them for a moment, and the Christian parents, I would say, first and foremost, that gender identity is based on lies. And as a Christian, we know that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And so the truth isn't an abstract concept. The truth is a person. And the truth is, as you said already, there is male and there is female. There's never been a third gamete, a third sex, a third anything. There's male and there's female. And so I would say to Christian schools, to Christian staff, to Christian parents, you really need to make a choice. Are you going to stand with lies and deception, or are you going to stand for the truth? And secondly, I would say the Bible's very clear about what happens to people, or what Jesus thinks should happen to people who lead little ones astray. And that is, it's better for you to have a millstone tied around your neck and to be cast into the sea than to cause any harm to these young ones. And so this is very serious. This isn't a matter of preference or a matter of, what girls should be able to wear shorts instead of dresses at school or something. Like, this is, boys can't be girls and girls can't be boys. That it is biology 101, it is Bible 101. And so let's get real about it. Let's stop making it someone else's problem, and let's own it and do something about it.
I agree. If you don't stand for something, you will fall for anything, right?
Correct.
What do you want to see governments around the world doing?
Yeah, well, here in Australia, where I started in 2018 is where I still am today, and that is we need to reinstate the definition of male and female back into the Sex Discrimination Act. So, Julia Gillard, as her last act, one of her last acts of Prime Minister in her government, removed the definitions of male and female from the Sex Discrimination Act in 2013. And so there are no protections for sex in the Sex Discrimination Act, only for people who identify as. So it's insane. And so my beautiful friend Sal Grover is currently preparing for her big court case in April where sex, gender identity is being challenged in the Sex Discrimination Act. And so she runs and is the CEO of Giggle for Girls, an app, going against Roxy Tickle, who is a man identifying as a female. And that court case will be in the federal court, and it is all about which is going to take precedence, sex or gender identity. And so all I have worked towards and what I continue to work towards is that legislators must put that definition back in law, because if we have that in law, everything else is resolved. Everything else is resolved. Then, and this isn't about excluding these people from sport. It's just saying if you're a male, you're in male sport. If you're female, you're in a female sport.
That's it.
In schools, it will mean that doesn't matter how you identify or how you want to wear your hair or how you want to dress. If you're male, you use the male toilets and stay in male dorms. If you're female, so on. So it really resolves everything if we get those definitions back into law. And, everyone on the street, everyone knows what a male is, what a female is.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Julia Gillard was very crafty and removed it, and that has caused nothing but problems ever since. So we need some politicians to stand up and do the right thing and put it back into law.
Come on. The ramifications of one person's actions, hey? Yikes. Okay, what do you want to say to churches around the world, Kirralie?
Love the truth. Love Jesus. If you really do love Jesus and love the truth, you'll stand for the truth. And it's really disheartening that so many people are so confused by what the truth is. And because it's not confusing. It's written there in the very opening chapters of the Bible, of history. It's confirmed by science, and it's confirmed by every culture throughout history in the world of what male and female is. And so I would say stand up, be courageous. I have read some fabulous books in the last few months, and two with very similar titles. One was by Eric Metaxas, A Letter to the American Church, and the other was by Francis Chan called Letters to the Church. And in both of those books, it refers to the similarities between 1930s Germany and today, and how the Christian church just abdicated. They refused to do anything but bow down on this, I'll call it the idol of evangelism or of the gospel, denying the fact that Jesus is the truth. He is the truth. You can't separate these things, And so let's be the church. Let's be salt and light. Let's stand up and offer the hope and the freedom. And I love that Jesus says, the truth will set you free, because He is the truth and He will set us free. And so anyone who's struggling with these things can be set free by the truth, not by lies, not by deception. We're never going to help a child or anyone else by lying to them. It's not going to be helpful, and it's ultimately going to be very destructive. So churches, stand up, love the truth. And I will say, I'll hint at it, that I'm working on a book that just plainly will speak about the biblical theology. I do have a Bachelor of Theology. I don't know how much that's worth to so many people, but I have a Bachelor of Theology. I love the Word of God. I don't think it's very complicated to understand that there's male and female, that there's truth, that there's lies. We know what the Bible says about liars. We know what the Bible says about those who cause others to lie. So we don't have to complicate it. Don't overcomplicate it. Just be truthful. Love Jesus.
Love that so much. Kirralie, any closing thoughts for the audience today?
Look, I know that I come across as it's very black and white and plain and simple. I've been doing this for several years now, and I've had to come to that point of drawing the line in the sand. But let me say, these days, and whether you're a Christian or not, these days, this is what's happening. We have to... it's very hard to just hide or withdraw from what's going on in the world now. It impacts us through social media, through government policy, in our workplace, in our education system. And so it's really important now that you make a decision where you stand on these things. Be informed, be educated, and be courageous. It's, it doesn't mean that we're not afraid or that things aren't hard, but, they've come at me 5 times in court cases. I've stood my ground. I've played the game of chicken and I've won, not because I am some strong, superhero person. It's simply because I'm standing on the truth. I'm standing on what's right. And you know what? Even if I lost those cases, I'd still stand. I would absolutely still stand because it is right and it is true. Yeah. And so you're not alone. You are not alone. Please reach out if you feel alone. You are not alone. And there are plenty of us that will stand with you shoulder to shoulder. We've got your back and we can do this together.
Kirralie, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Honestly, I feel like you've really equipped our listeners to take action. We don't sit on the sidelines any longer. We're going to get our hands dirty.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to talk to you.
As perfectly put on Binary's website, a strong society has its foundations in truth. What is truth? Well, as Kirralie said, she quoted Jesus in John 14, verse 6 of the Bible, where he says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Well, if we as a society and as nations in the world choose to refute the word of God, then we will have to pay the consequences. And already we are hearing harrowing stories of people who have been led down a very destructive path, and the effects have been devastating. We who know the truth must rise up and have our voices heard. Okay, well, you've been equipped, so now it's time to act. We'll include links and resources to today's episode, but if you have any questions in the meantime, please do not hesitate to reach out. info@nalini.tranquim.com. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for listening to the Under the Rug podcast with Nalini Tranquim. To learn more about Nalini's online coaching programs, to book Nalini for your upcoming events, or for more information, please visit nalinitranquim.com/contact or email us at info@nalinitranquim.com.